Hi everyone, I am Agatha. I'm a massive introvert who completely freezes up around crowds. My biggest, most embarrassing quirk is that my body just starts hiccuping uncontrollably whenever I get super anxious. I usually try to stay hidden in my room, but somehow my crazy cousin managed to drag me out to a wild party. I was standing right in the middle of that loud, buzzing room, sweating through my clothes from pure nervousness. I was waiting near the entrance for a random guy to walk in, all because of a ridiculous bet. My cousin had this smug look on her face when she told me to forget about my annoying ex-boyfriend, Mateo. She challenged me, promising to give me $50 if I could just get the phone number of the very next guy who walked through the front door. Just then, the door swung open and a handsome guy stepped inside. He had this incredibly confident, magnetic vibe that completely drew everyone's attention. I told myself that he was my target. I hurriedly started walking toward him, but my anxiety took over. My legs tangled, I tripped over my own feet, and I crashed directly into him. Before I could even process what was happening, we were both lying flat on the floor, and our lips were pressed together. My eyes went wide in absolute shock. As we lay there, I could actually taste a sweet hint of grapes on his lip. My heart was pounding like crazy against my rib. Panicked, I quickly pushed him away, scrambled to my feet, and he stood up right after me. My entire body was trembling from head to toe. I shut my eyes tight, hiccuped with every single breath, and stuttered badly while begging him to give me his phone number. The guy narrowed his eyes and looked completely confused by my bizarre behavior, but he still took out a piece of paper, wrote down his number, and handed it to me. The second that note touched my fingers, I knew it was time to escape from the scene immediately. I ran all the way back to my house without stopping. When I pushed open the front door and walked into the living room, my mom looked absolutely thrilled to see me back so soon. I scratched the back of my head awkwardly, looking down, and confessed to her that parties just really were not my thing. My mom smiled warmly and reminded me that cooking definitely was my thing. She excitedly shared some incredible news, telling me that the local soccer club was looking for a new chef. Since she had already recommended me for the position, she said they wanted me to start as soon as possible. I was bursting with joy because I had dreamed of becoming a chef since I was a little girl, and my dream was finally coming true. The next morning, I eagerly arrived at the soccer club, proudly wearing my crisp new chef uniform. The coach gathered the whole team together and started introducing me, but my jaw almost hit the floor when I spotted Mateo standing in the crowd. He was my ex-boyfriend, and he just stood there looking completely cold and indifferent. I felt so incredibly flustered and nervous that my hiccups returned instantly. I quickly looked away to avoid his eyes, but then I saw the handsome guy from the party standing right there on the field. I could not believe my eye. He stared right back at me with a cool, knowing smile. I immediately faced down toward the grass, holding my head and crying silently to myself, feeling like my life was officially over. Right after the introduction, I ran out onto the open soccer pitch to get some fresh air. I closed my eyes and took a deep, steady breath to calm my racing heart. Suddenly, a hand patted my shoulder, startling me so much that I started hiccuping nonstop. I turned around and realized it was him again. He had a mischievous, flirty expression as he asked why I had not called or texted him yet, playfully reminding me that I was the one who had asked for his number. He laughed and asked if I was really that shy, before finally introducing himself as Killian. I looked down, my face burning bright red, and managed to stutter through my hiccups that it had just been a joke and begged him to please leave me alone. Instead of leaving, he took a step even closer. I stepped backward in a total panic and pushed him away with all my might, which accidentally made him lose his balance and fall backward. I quickly stretched out my arms to catch him, but I ended up falling right on top of him instead. For the second time, our lips met. My eyes widened in shock, and this time, I noticed he smelled wonderfully like sweet chocolate. Killian looked incredibly playful as he asked if I liked his lips so much that I could not stay away, teasing that I should just confess my feelings. I scrambled up, covered my mouth while hiccuping, and ran straight away without looking back. I finally stopped running to catch my breath, grumbling to myself that I had better stay 10 miles away from that guy. Just then, Mateo walked past me, looking completely uninterested. I suddenly worried if he had seen us, but then a wave of sadness hit me. I realized there was no point in worrying because he was the one who dumped me, so he probably did not care about me at all. Once I got to the kitchen, I took a deep breath to calm my mind and told myself to focus because I was there to do my job. But dealing with those athletic guys made it nearly impossible. They constantly snuck up on me while I was working. One time, while I was beating eggs, they jumped out and scared me so badly that the raw egg mixture splashed all over my clothes, sending me into a fit of hiccup. They even made fun of me, sticking out their tongues and making ugly faces when I accidentally got lost in their changing room. Surprisingly, Killian always arrived just in time to rescue me. He would use a very stern voice, ordering everyone to stop right there. My eyes filled with gratitude, thinking he was my hero, until he told me to close my eyes and threw a terribly smelly, sweaty towel right at my face. The horrible scent made me so dizzy that I literally fainted on the spot. On top of that, he was easily the pickiest eater on the planet, constantly complaining and demanding new meals. When I served him a plate of cheesy chicken pasta, he casually mentioned that he was cutting back on starch to build muscle. I swallowed my annoyance, took the plate back, and removed the pasta. When I returned, he feigned forgetfulness and claimed he was lactose intolerant. Trying to stay professional, I took it back again to remove the cheese, leaving nothing but a plain piece of chicken. But then he put on a fake crying face, saying he felt too bad for the poor little chicken to eat it. I snapped, pointing at the completely empty plate, and angrily asked if he was allergic to the porcelain plate too. The other players were much easier to feed, especially Mateo. Since we used to date, I still remembered his favorite food. I walked over to his table and gently told him that I had added some extra pork just for him. Mateo did not even look up, kept chewing, and coldly stated that he did not like pork and absolutely hated pig. Before I could process his rudeness, Killian suddenly intervened, making an irritated Mateo look even more annoyed. Killian told me that I should be focusing on him instead, suggesting we discuss his dietary needs in private. Before I could even open my mouth to decline, he slipped a small note into my hand that read Blue Diamond Restaurant at noon. The idea of being alone with him felt bizarre, but I reasoned that understanding his eating habits would actually help my job, so I nodded along. Going to that restaurant turned out to be a massive mistake. As I sat there diligently taking notes, he listed an absurd amount of food restrictions. He claimed he could not have more than 2.5 grams of salt a day, needed mayonnaise on absolutely everything, could not stand mushrooms, and wanted his spaghetti completely bare without any tomato sauce. I stared at him, genuinely wondering if he had just dropped out of the sky from another planet. To make things worse, he spent the entire meal smiling and staring directly at me. Feeling highly suspicious, I asked him straight out if he had a crush on me or something. Killian burst out laughing, pointed directly at my face, and loudly told me that I had a giant piece of green vegetable stuck in my teeth. I gasped, pulled out a small hand mirror from my bag, and froze in horror at my reflection. I scrambled to run to the restroom, but before I could escape the dining area, Killian caught up and pulled me back, holding a small ball of yarn. He raised his eyebrow and asked if it belonged to me. I looked down and realized a loose thread from my dress hemline had unraveled, drawing the amused eyes of everyone in the restaurant. I stood there crimson-faced, hiccuping uncontrollably, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me alive. But then, to my surprise, Killian took off his jacket and gently placed it over my shoulder. I looked at him with dreamy eyes, completely swooning over how sweet he was being, until he caught me staring at him. Embarrassed, I immediately looked down, rapidly clicking on my phone screen, and gave a very awkward laugh, rambling that I was just trying to beat a really high level in Candy Crush. Strangely, over the next few days, Mateo started being nice to me, entirely too nice. He walked past me in the dining hall, stopped, and praised my cooking, saying it was top-notch as always. Then, he softly asked if I could make him those delicious vegetable fritters we used to enjoy together when we were dating. I blushed deeply as my heart started racing, amazed that he still remembered our old favorite meal. I sprinted straight to the kitchen and put on my earphones to calm my racing emotions. Soon, I completely lost myself in the music, cooking while singing along and dancing to a catchy Taylor Swift song about how unique I was. I was doing all sorts of weird dance gestures completely in my own world. Suddenly, I turned around and froze. Killian was standing right there, smiling and quietly watching me dance. I screamed in my head, wondering how long he had been standing there. I felt incredibly flustered, hiccuped, and quickly turned back to continue cooking, but I accidentally touched the burning hot pan. I cried out in pain, having burnt myself. Killian rushed over immediately, took my injured hand, and placed it under the cool running water of the faucet. He looked down at me, teasingly asking if I was okay and mocking how I could not even take care of myself. Then, he firmly insisted on finishing all my remaining kitchen work, and even prepared a special dish for the two of us. Watching his broad back from behind as he cooked, I could not help but think how incredibly charming he was. As we sat down to eat together, we talked a lot, and it turned out we shared a ton of things in common. Beneath all his teasing, he was actually gentle, deeply caring, and an amazing listener. As we finished our meal, I suddenly realized that I had stopped hiccuping a long time ago. One afternoon, I was out by the soccer pitch, sweating in the heat and holding one hand up to block the intense sun while giving out water bottles to the players. Suddenly, Killian walked over and used his tall frame to block the sunlight for me. I turned to look up at him, and it felt like the bright sunshine was drawing a beautiful halo around his face. My eyes sparkled and I found myself smiling warmly at him. Then I caught myself, blushed deeply, and wondered why on earth I was smiling like a schoolgirl. Right then, a fancy-looking girl named Sloane marched over. She grabbed Killian's arm tightly, acting incredibly clingy, and whined about why he had not replied to her messages, complaining that he had left her hanging all night. She pointed to her eye bags, crossly blaming him for her dark circles. I felt uncomfortable and turned to leave, but out of nowhere, Mateo grabbed my arm and pulled me into a quiet corner. Mateo looked deeply concerned and asked me why I was getting so close to Killian, warning me that Killian was only messing with me. I was totally confused and asked him what he meant by that. Mateo explained that Killian competed with him in absolutely everything. He claimed that he had only been acting cold to me to protect me from Killian's jealousy. He told me that now that Killian knew I was important to him, he would harm me just to hurt Mateo. I tried to defend Killian, saying I thought he was just trying to be a nice person, but Mateo scoffed, pointing out that Killian's dad was the club's biggest sponsor. He asked me if I really thought a guy like that wanted to hang out with ordinary people like us, especially when Sloane, whose family owned the largest hospital in the state, was right there waiting for him. I stood there, not knowing what to believe anymore, but looking at Sloane and Killian talking happily together. I had to admit they looked like a perfect couple. A short while later, I was walking through the dining hall, holding a coffee tray, when I clumsily bumped right into Sloane. Actually, she was the one who bumped into me first, but the dark liquid spilled all over her clothes. Sloane exploded in anger, arrogantly asking if I was blind and demanding to know why they let a doofus work at the club. Killian immediately stepped in, calmly telling Sloane to stop, because she was clearly the one who had bumped into me. He seemed so sweet and protective. I began to think that maybe Mateo had completely misunderstood him. However, a few days later, I spotted Killian and Mateo having a fierce argument in the hallway. The fight got so intense that Killian actually pushed Mateo backward against the wall. I tried to step in to intervene, but they both angrily brushed me off. I stood there completely baffled, wondering what was really going on between them. The real disaster struck a few days later. I had just returned from the grocery store when the head coach confronted me in a fit of pure rage. He loudly demanded to know how Mateo had ended up hospitalized for food poisoning from eating my food. I started stuttering, completely shocked, asking how that could even happen. The coach refused to listen, cut me off, and coldly told me that I was fired on the spot. My heart sank and my hiccups returned instantly. Back in the kitchen, my head was spinning in a million circles. I knew I had not done anything wrong with the food. I was sadly packing my personal things into a box when Sloane walked in, looking incredibly arrogant and cocky. She mocked me, saying that it looked like I had finally met my match. She bragged that it only took a few simple tricks to get rid of me and my phony, needy act, warning me to stop dreaming about Killian because I was simply not on their level. I froze in shock and asked her what she meant by our level, demanding to know who was working with her. Sloane just gave me a wicked smirk and strutted out of the room. That was the exact moment the memory of Killian and Mateo fighting in the hallway flashed through my mind. It all clicked. I assumed Killian must have conspired with Sloane to poison Mateo just to ruin my career in the process. I felt sick to my stomach, wondering how he could be so cruel. To make it worse, he had the nerve to send me a casual text right after, acting as if nothing had happened. I scolded myself for being a dummy, wishing I had listened to Mateo from the start and stayed far away from Killian. I decided to visit Mateo in the hospital to apologize, but the moment I walked into his room, he coldly ordered me to get out. The harsh look in his eyes was exactly like the day he dumped me, leaving me feeling completely sad, tired, and defeated. The next day was the city's championship final match, and honestly, as I sat in the crowded stadium seat, I did not even know why I was there. I looked down at my phone, staring at a text message Killian had sent me, saying he did not know why I was mad, but that he really needed to see me and begged me to come. I looked down at the pitch, searching for Mateo, but I could not find him anywhere. I sadly assumed he was still too sick from the poisoning and had to miss the biggest match of the season. Up on the field, the game started, but Killian seemed completely distracted and totally off his game. I watched him closely, wondering what was wrong with him. Suddenly, a nervous female voice beside me cried out Killian's name. I turned and noticed the lady sitting right next to me was fidgeting anxiously, her hands trembling. I started talking to her and quickly figured out that she was actually Killian's mom. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and shared a shocking secret. She whispered that Killian's little sister had been kidnapped. The kidnapper was blackmailing Killian, threatening that he would never see his sister again unless he intentionally made his team lose the championship. I was completely horrified, and my anxiety triggered a non-stop fit of hiccups. Down on the pitch, Killian ran toward the goal. He had the perfect shot, but instead of kicking, he hesitated and passed the ball to another player who easily scored. The entire stadium erupted in cheers, and the teammates ran over to celebrate the goal with Killian, but from the stand. I could see that all the color had drained from his face. He looked absolutely terrified. Just as I feared, the threats kept coming. His mom's phone rang, and she looked ready to collapse. I knew I could not just sit there and pray, so I begged her to let me help find clues. She played me a voice recording that the kidnapper had sent of her little daughter crying. I strained my ears, listening closely to the background noise, when I suddenly heard a faint bird sound. It was a parrot saying peekaboo over and over again. My heart stopped. I knew that exact sound because it was Mateo's pet parrot from when we used to play with it during our relationship. I turned to his mom and firmly told her that I knew exactly who was behind this, declaring that it was Mateo. Suddenly, Sloane, who was sitting in the row right behind us, interrupted our conversation. She looked shocked and blurted out that she could excuse a fake food poisoning plot, but asked how Mateo dared to harm her Killian. I turned around, stunned and furious, and demanded that she repeat what she just said. Sloane panicked and confessed everything. She admitted that Mateo had asked her to fake the medical paperwork for the food poisoning, and since she figured it would also kick me out of the club, she had agreed. But she raised her hands, swearing that she had absolutely nothing to do with kidnapping Killian's sister. Without losing a second, we all rushed over to Mateo's house. I banged heavily on the front door, and it took him forever to finally open it. When he did, I quickly put on a fake worried expression. I lied, asking if he was okay, and babbled that I had thought a lot about it, realizing how important he was to me and begging him not to let me lose him again. Mateo looked incredibly cocky. He laughed in my face, telling me to look at myself. He cruelly admitted that he had only dated me for fun, and asked if I truly thought he could ever like someone like me. He slammed the door shut, then immediately opened it again with a sarcastic face, wagging his finger at me, and rudely requested that I never serve him pork again. As Mateo turned his back to walk inside, Sloane quietly snaked in behind him. My entire attitude changed instantly. I dropped the act, looked at him cold, and asked him sternly if he seriously thought I would ever want him back after the despicable things he had done to me and Killian. Mateo looked deeply offended and angry. He scoffed at Killian's name, mocking him for trying to attack him just for telling the truth. He wiggled around sarcastically, calling Killian pathetic for going after his leftovers, pointing directly at me and laughing. Then in his arrogance, he blurted out the entire truth. He admitted how he had cooked up this whole scheme to ruin Killian's career out of pure jealousy. He explained that his rage was triggered when the other team members visited him in the hospital and told him not to worry about missing the match, because they had a new strategy to cover his absence and would perform well anyway. Mateo's face turned dark, and he clenched his fists, angrily yelling that he was not a pawn that could easily be kicked out of the team. I stared at him with a deadpan face and told him very clearly that he was utterly pathetic. Right at that moment, Sloane appeared from the back room, leading the frightened little girl by the hand. Sloane grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the exit, telling me that we had to go because there was no time left. Mateo lunged forward and grabbed my hand, asking where I was going and demanding that I admit I was still smitten with him. I looked him dead in the eyes and told him that the old Agatha could not come to the phone right now. Mateo looked completely confused and asked why. I raised my hand, slapped him hard across the face, and finished by saying it was because she was dead. Leaving him completely dumbfounded on the floor, we ran out. We rushed back to the stadium as fast as we could. We ran right up to the edge of the pitch. I shouted Killian's name at the top of my lungs and lifted his little sister's hands high into the air so he could see her. Killian looked over, his eyes wide with surprise, and then a massive wave of relief washed over his face as he smiled and nodded at me. With his mind finally free, he started playing like an absolute pro, dominating the field and leading his team to a spectacular victory. He was even awarded the prestigious Player of the Match title. During the live television interview after the game, Killian held up his trophy. He spoke into the microphone, saying it was an absolute honor to receive the title, but stated that he wanted to shout out to someone incredibly important. He declared that without her, this victory would have never happened. He then turned his body directly toward the stands, looked right at me, and shouted his thanks to me. Countless flashing cameras instantly turned to face me. I was completely surprised, but I could not help but smile proudly. Afterward, he rushed off the pitch, caught my hand, and dragged me to a quiet, private corner of the field where I explained every single detail of Mateo and Sloane's plot to him. Killian shook his head, saying that he always knew Mateo was a jerk, but admitted he never expected him to be that evil. He squeezed my hand tightly, smiling gently, and told me not to worry because we would see how Mateo liked being permanently banned from the soccer club forever. He then looked deeply and sincerely into my eyes, holding both of my hands in his. He whispered that he wanted to tell me that he had finally found something just as important to him as soccer, and specified that it was me. Before I could even gasp, he reached up, gently grabbed my face, and